Hello, everyone, and welcome to Drop the Gloves with Wichita Thunder head coach Malcolm Cameron. Drop the Gloves is a weekly program where you, the fans, get to ask your questions about the Thunder, hockey, or sports in general, or if you were just looking for some advice about life, then you get straight answers from Coach Cameron. In this week's episode, the coach discusses team updates with us. He tells us the tactical advantages of fighting, and we find out if the coach has been a good boy for Santa this year. So let's get right to Drop the Gloves. So let's welcome back Coach Cameron this week. First of all, let's begin with your team updates for us, Coach.
Team updates. On Sunday we traded Mitch Holmberg to the Colorado team in the ECHL. We were in a position where we were just carrying too many guys with some impending potential changes coming down as well from our affiliate team, and you just can't, keeping X amount of players on your roster. You can only carry 20 and then 2 on the reserve. So it was just a better opportunity. Colorado was really shorthanded, and it's a good opportunity for Mitch to be a little bit more in the lineup each and every day.
You and I were just talking about the fact you're going to have just one goalie for this Friday. So how did that work out for you?
Something that's just it's one of those things. We only got one game. If it was more than one game, then I would be worried about having to try and find another goaltender. But Drew's more than capable of winning us the game on Friday.
Heading back to this last weekend, a very disappointing weekend. I know you were a little frustrated by how things went. What are some things you take away from this, though, to still try to build off of?
Well, we went from an extreme high from the previous weekend to an extreme low this past weekend. So being able to identify the differences in our game, it's not the personnel. If anything, we got our leading scorer back from the American Hockey League. So you would say on paper our lineup was even better, but it just didn't turn out to be that way. So, there's an exercise that I do with the team and the leadership group, and then it's an old coaching technique to try and identify why these differences in weekends happen, and we were able to isolate some of those things. The biggest thing is the work ethic. You have to work to win. And I don't think our work ethic was solid enough top to bottom for 60 minutes. I mean, there were some great stretches, yes. Certainly the first period was a real good first period against Allen there on Sunday afternoon. I mean, we outshot them. We had a number of glorious scoring chances. Had we have bared down around the net, we might have had a 2 or 3 goal lead heading into the second period. But the work ethic has got to be for 60 minutes, and it's got to be top to bottom in your lineup.
When your team is struggling through a stretch like this, how do you balance kind of, getting on them to push them forward without kind of tearing at the spirit of the team kind of thing?
Well, you don't worry about the spirit. I mean, guys have to realize that professional athletes are paid to win. They're not paid to show up. They're not paid to look good. They're paid to win. That's the bottom line. When you're a pro athlete, you take money. The expectations are that you win. And we went on. We didn't feel we won the Kelly Cup after playing so great the weekend before, and we're not as low as maybe people think we are after losing these 2 this weekend. You have to stay even keel. You can't let the highs get too high or the lows get too low. You just got to be more business-like with your approach. So yesterday, rather than a day off, we brought the guys in and we had a compete and work ethic practice. And that's not one where you skate guys into the ground because they get nothing from that. You want game situation stuff, things that we need to get better at, competing in dirty areas, getting first to the puck, being able to defend really skilled players that have the puck, and that's what we did for an hour and 15 yesterday.
You've talked on previous shows about how this is an age where players really want to have everything explained to them. Do you find that it's easier to get across to them now about, hey, work ethic, you got to really work your work ethic, or is it more of a challenge?
I think guys knew. I didn't have to really say much about it. Our leadership group was very accountable and feel that everything spirals off of them, everything tumbles off of them, and they have to set the example for the rest of the group.
Excellent. Well, let us head to our fan questions this week. First of all, we begin with Elijah from Wichita. He says, so many players have moved up to Binghamton. Do you expect to get those players back, or is this like when a guy is promoted to AAA in baseball, then he doesn't likely return?
No, we do expect to get guys back from Binghamton. The Ottawa Senators can only carry 23 players on their active roster. That's all they're allowed under the collective bargaining agreement in the NHL. So Usually what happens is, and maybe fans don't understand it, because I had somebody ask me this yesterday, so you've got 7 players up in Binghamton, how come 7 players didn't come back down? Well, you look at it this way, Ottawa has an injury, so a player moves up from Binghamton, a player moves up from me. All of a sudden the player in Binghamton gets hurt. So now they're calling up another player. So that's 3 guys gone for 2 players lost, right? And, that's could be how it works again. Ottawa gets an injury, a guy from Binghamton goes up, a guy in Binghamton gets hurt. Now all of a sudden it's 5 players for 3 injured players. So at some point in time, and usually over the Christmas period, teams start to get healthy. Ottawa's starting to get healthy. Ottawa also had a number of players get suspensions, which drew players up. Binghamton's starting to get healthy. So when everybody's healthy, Binghamton would have like 15, 16 forwards and 8 D. So that's way too many. They were carrying 12 and 6 at one point in time. They may carry 1 extra, maybe 13 and 6 or 12 and 7, depending on how they look at it. So that means we're going to get some players, and we'll get one back tomorrow. Actually, as of today.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Lily from Junction City asked of you, you mentioned a player last week who was more of a finesse player, as you put it. Is there really such a thing in hockey?
Yeah, there is. I mean, I wouldn't say that it's as prevalent today as it was maybe in the 80s and the early 90s, or even the 90s themselves. When you talk about finesse, that's what they're known for, is their playmaking ability, their skill with the puck. You look at a guy like Dennis Savard, for longtime hockey fans, Wayne Gretzky, those guys weren't physically imposing, they weren't fighting, they weren't hitting much, they were just dynamic skill players. So when we say finesse, they're probably more better with the puck than they are without the puck, trying to get it back. A player like that would be like Alexis Loiseau. He's not going to overpower you physically. He's not a guy that's going to go in and blow you up and steal the puck back. He's an extremely smart player. He does it by stripping pucks, which, lifting sticks and stripping pucks. So that's more of a finesse type of guy.
Our next question was from an anonymous person who says, I see that there are a lot of teams that are really catching fire right now, Colorado, Toledo, and Manchester as examples. What are those teams doing to get so hot, and can you get that kind of run like they are having?
For sure, and a lot of those teams, again, it's about where your roster is sometimes with your affiliates and how many guys you have injured and called up, right? Like Toledo hasn't gone through the rash of call-ups yet. I've won 2 Brabham Cups in this league for regular season titles, so I do know when you get on a good run and your record is really good, that's when the vultures start circling from the American Hockey League, and it's not just your affiliate. It's all of a sudden, Toledo's 20-4, they must have great players, we're going to grab this guy, we're going to grab that guy, and then it becomes hard to sustain that. You saw that a little bit with Tulsa. Tulsa got off to the great start, now they've kind of come back down again because they've lost some key players due to promotions and injuries. So everybody kind of settles down. It's a lot harder to have those huge seasons all season long now than it was a couple of years ago. And for sure, I think we're a team that's going to be very streaky here at some point. It's just a matter of getting some guys back, getting our best lineup type of thing together again and going. Did I expect to lose Rumble, Krushelnyski, Rodwald, Urkamps, Gags, so on and so forth all at one time? I mean, those are really key. I mean, Rumble and Rodwald and Krushelnyski were 60% of our first unit power play and 2/3 of our first line. They were doing a lot of scoring for us. So did I anticipate losing all those guys at one point for a long stretch? No. Has that affected our record? For sure it has. However, we have depth in our lineup, and it's opportunities for guys to step up and assume more opportunity and role. Some guys have, some guys haven't. Some guys have for short periods. We need them to be able to do it and sustain it for longer periods.
Next we have Ariana from McPherson. She says, how do you choose the captains of your team?
Well, I did it. I did it this year more about who I thought the veteran or who the players in the team respected in terms of their work ethic, their approach to the game. Vince Arsenault, for example, is a veteran player who's won 2 championships. Guys respect him for his work ethic and how he plays the game, how hard he plays the game. James Melindy's a guy who players seem to gravitate to. They go and they ask questions, and they lean on him for advice. And I like the way he practices every day. I like the way he approaches games every day. So those guys have to set examples. And then ILO just works hard every single day, and he's been a stalwart here, so I thought continuity would be good.
Next up, we have Chris from Wichita. He would like to know, are you a believer in the idea of momentum? Because he hears a lot of commentators in sports say that just isn't true.
For sure it's true. It's like rolling a tire downhill. The more speed it picks up, the more momentum it gets. So yeah, it is. There's ways to change momentum in hockey games. If you're struggling and the team seems to have you on your heels, different ways. Big hit, block shot, or a fight. Those are three things that can change the momentum of a hockey game. And guys know when we need those things. I don't ever have to tell them. Guys know. And that's what good leaders do. They go out and they try and do one of those things to change the momentum.
I want to ask, because you had made a comment, I think a couple weeks ago when I was asking about Ryan Tiesink.
Yep.
You said he came out every time after you guys had given up a goal. Is that, are you seeing him as kind of a momentum changer?
Yeah, well, actually, I put him out every time we score a goal, too, because you want to keep that momentum. You want to get the puck right back into their end and keep them on their heels. So, yeah, I mean, there's certain guys that I can lean on to be momentum changers or keep momentum in a hockey game. Ryan Tiesink's a fine example of that.
Aubrey from Wichita asks of you, do you guys fly to your away games or take the bus? I would think some trips you would take would be really long for the bus.
They are very long. We drove the bus down to Charleston, South Carolina.
Really?
Yeah, we did. But we leave early. Like, you leave a couple of days early so that you get in usually, midday the day before your game. So typically you travel all night when you should be sleeping. We have a sleeper bus, so the guys sleep when they're supposed to be sleeping. And then you roll off the bus, you practice, stretch out, go check into the hotel, and get ready for the game the next day.
You're at least a day ahead then when you get there. Huh?
Yeah, always at least a day ahead.
Wyatt from Kansas City asked, Coach, I don't want to come across with a disrespectful question, but I didn't get this at all. You have had such huge success everywhere you have been. Why does it seem you only coach in one place for two or three seasons before moving on?
Well, a lot of that actually had to do with the fact I worked for an ownership group that owned multiple teams.
Oh, really?
So I ended up working for them in 3 different cities. So I actually worked for them for 6 years. In Cincinnati, they sold that team to the people that own it now, the Nederlanders who own the U.S. Bank Arena, and my team, my ownership group owned a team in Long Beach, California. So I went into Long Beach. I was kind of the fixer, so to speak. I would walk into a bad franchise, or they'd take me and move me to a different franchise that was struggling, and I'd try and rebuild it. Same thing happened in Long Beach. I was there 2 seasons. A new group came in to buy it. I had the option of staying with the new owners or going to Texas, where they owned another franchise. So I liked working for Rick Adams, who was the former commissioner of the league, Barry Kemp, who's a Hollywood movie producer, television and movie producer. So I went from Cincy to Long Beach to Texas. And then when the franchise moved from Texas to Ontario, I had the option to go back out to California and continue to work for them. But I ended up trying something different and moved to Florida because it was a franchise that I always admired from afar. I ended up settling in South Florida. That's where my home is. But sometimes grass isn't always greener on the other side. I probably, in retrospect, should have continued on with the same ownership group because I had great success with them and I really enjoyed it. So hope that answers the question. Yeah.
Well, it makes good sense.
And then I was then I was in Regina for 3 years until that team got sold. And then new owners come in and decided even though I had a great season and was a runner-up for Eastern Conference Coach of the Year, they wanted to hire all their own personnel, which is kind of the new way to do things when you buy a franchise at every level of hockey. So, that kind of explains it, I hope.
Are teams sold quite frequently, or is that before and not as much now?
Well, I would say junior teams aren't sold all that much. My owner, Russ Parker, who's one of the nicest gentlemen you ever want to meet, just decided he was kind of older guy. I think he was in his mid-70s, had owned it since 1986. So, 20 years roughly, or 18, 19 years he had the team. And it was just time for him to kind of simplify his life. He lived in Calgary. The team was in Regina, so we didn't get to see it as much as he wanted. Spent a lot of time with grandkids in Phoenix and different places and that. So I think he just wanted to simplify his life, and we've kept in contact. I know he misses owning the team, and I think he kind of would have liked to have kept it another couple of years, but he's also happy in retirement.
Excellent. Next is Eli from Wichita. He says, if you were commissioner of hockey, he's curious about what things you would want to see changed.
Well, the biggest thing, as far as our league goes, I think the biggest thing I would do would be to shorten the schedule, like in terms of games, and maybe knock it down to 66 and get rid of the midweek games. Because, something, it's hard to draw fans for midweek games because, at our level of hockey, it's a lot of families. Kids are in school, kids get sporting events, different things like that. It's hard to get off of work at 5:30, go home, cook supper, get to the rink, and watch a hockey game at 7 o'clock at night. So I think those games could be cut out. I think they cost you probably more in terms of injuries and things like that than you can gain revenue-wise from them, and just play weekend games. That way you get more practice time, because the ECHL is really a development league. So you want your players practicing a lot. That's where they get a lot of repetitions and a lot of improvement. So, you get rid of that Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday game, you get an extra couple days of practice.
I think you guys had a game earlier this season in Atlanta, was it? Where the game was like 11 o'clock?
Yeah.
Was that for school?
That was a school day game. A lot of those teams do that now. If they have a midweek game scheduled, they'll sell it to a corporate sponsor, and that corporate sponsor will give the school board tickets to the game for the kids. So, just a way to generate better revenue than you would as if you were just trying to rely on ticket sales for a midweek game. But, again, I'd still like to see those Monday to Thursday games. Well, we don't play Mondays in our league, but Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, I'd like to see us get rid of those and just play, Friday, Saturday, Sundays.
You guys got quite a few of those in February and March, I believe.
Oh, so. Yeah, we do. But, again, it all goes sometimes on building availability, because, big building like this here, or the one in Tulsa, they have other events on weekends too, right? So it's tough to ask a group like the Red Hot Chili Peppers to play on a Monday night when Saturday they're going to be sold out. So I'm sure they'd sell out on a Monday anyway.
Very true. Matt from Newton asks, are you superstitious as a coach? Do you have rituals or things that you do when the team is on streaks, and were you that way as a player?
I was definitely that way as a player. I was a superstitious freak, and in fact, I think I drove my wife absolutely crazy, from the amount of meatballs I'd have with my pregame meal to, when I would listen to music, taking the same route to the rink every day, and just different things like that. I was probably early on as a coach, but I'm not anymore, because I realized that as a coach, when you're managing 20 people that are playing, or 22, whatever it happens to be, it's a lot harder to control things. Really, I like to say I plan the work, the players work the plan. And so I don't get wrapped up in any more in superstitions or rituals as far as a coach goes.
How many meatballs was it?
It used to be 9 meatballs with my spaghetti every pregame.
Oliver from Wichita would like to know, how come in hockey fights no one ever goes for the jersey to pull it over anyone's head anymore? That seemed to be the classic move years ago.
Well, the reason is because each player is required to wear not required to wear, but wears fight straps where your jerseys are tied to your pants. So it doesn't come up over your head anymore unless that strap breaks. And the reason being, if your jersey comes over your head now, you're kicked out of the game. It's an automatic game misconduct. Yeah, because if your jersey gets pulled all the way off, it's a huge advantage for that player, because now the guy you're fighting can't grab onto anything. And you look at, back in the 80s, 90s, Rob Ray, Bob Probert, everything used to come off. You'd pull their jersey, and next thing you know, it was like they were shirtless, and you can't grab skin and hold on and try and fight a guy. It's a huge advantage for the player who's still got his jersey on. So those are two reasons why, but mostly it's because the fight straps are tied to the pants now.
Okay, well, that makes sense.
Yep.
Kevin from Salina would like to know, do you think that you actually talked about this a little bit, but do you think that a player initiating a fight can be a tactical thing in a game.
For sure it is. For an example, we were down 1-0, I think it was, to Allen the other night in Allen, and Vince Arsenault went out and initiated a fight and got the bench all going. And we closed it. I think we were down 2-0, and we closed it 2-1 very few minutes after that fight. So yes, it can escalate guys' emotions. It can get people ramped up, and it can change the momentum in a game, for sure.
I noticed most of the players come to the guy in the penalty box, kind of pat him on the back, kind of thing.
Absolutely. It's a badge of honor. You're doing it for your team.
Excellent. Our next question comes from Jose from Wichita. He says, I hear managers in baseball say that they get outraged when a player gets ejected because they are hurting the team. Is that the same for coaches in hockey when a player earns a game misconduct?
Only if he doesn't take somebody with him. If he's the guy going by himself, it's not a good trade-off. But if you're at least taking somebody out of the game with you, then it's okay.
Do you discipline a player who just went out on their own and didn't take somebody with
them? Well, sometimes you don't agree. It might have been the referee. If it's a stupid thing, for sure I will. But if it's something where it's questionable judgment on the referee's part, I would never get mad at a player. But if it was a selfish thing, for sure. Okay. Most definitely.
Daniel from Hayesville would like to know from you, do you have a favorite hockey movie?
Yep, Slapshot.
Okay.
For sure.
Nice 1970s.
Yeah, I played for the Chiefs and in Johnstown. Yes, I did. I lived that life for 4 months.
Interesting. James from St. Louis would like to know, Alexander Ovechkin is such a good scorer, but he seems to never get his team too far in the playoffs. Would you consider him elite when he cannot come up big in the playoffs?
Well, there's two ways to answer that. I would say Alexander Ovechkin early on in his career was a completely different player than he is now. He was just really a goal scorer. He scored big goals. He was fairly physical. I mean, he could run over you, over top of you, around you, whatever. He's become a much more complete hockey player now. Much like Steve Yzerman was when he started. Steve Yzerman was a huge scorer in the NHL, but it wasn't until he learned that he had to play all 200 feet of the rink and be a good leader and all these things that the Red Wings started to win Stanley Cups. And he credits his coach, certainly with helping him do that, Scotty Moman and the coaching staff of the Red Wings at the time. It didn't mean he became any less of a good player, Yzerman, because to me he was one of the best. I think Ovechkin's starting to become that type of player. Now, you can't lay that lack of playoff success totally at his feet. The supporting cast has to step up. Checking gets tighter later in the season when the games become more meaningful, and certainly in the playoffs when it becomes do or die. They're not going to let Alexander Ovechkin get free. They're just not at the end of the day. When you play a Tuesday night game in December and it's one of 84 games on your schedule, sometimes you're not as tuned into that game as you are in the playoffs. So it's harder for those elite scorers to get as free. But he does so many other things now as a hockey player. I think he's just as valuable when he's not scoring because he's good defensively. He's a punishing hitter and he's a punishing forechecker. And he's become a really good penalty killer. So I think a lot of their lack of success is to do with the support personnel.
Kevin from Arkansas City would like to know, who are your favorite players in hockey to watch?
Well, I love the way Sidney Crosby plays. I don't always like the way he complains and whines on the ice, even though we're from the same hometown. But the way he approaches the game of hockey is at one speed and one speed only. And he will do whatever it takes to get to the net. I mean, he'll pull your eyes out, he'll bite you, he'll scratch you, he'll go over you, go underneath you, go around you. He is the best player in the world right now because of his compete. It's just incredible. So he for sure is my favorite player. I'm really partial to Johnny Gaudreau in Calgary because I think he just proves to people that size don't matter. That it's the size of your heart and your will to win. The guy is 150, 160 pounds, just a small little player, but you can't beat him on the ice. You can't take the puck off him. He is so strong for a smaller man. His compete is just off the chart. So for me, I like the players that can think the game and that are ultra competitive, and those are my two favorite.
Dylan from Wichita would like to know, because he has a whole series of questions in future shows.
Sure.
He says, Coach, I heard you say you live in Florida in the off season and that you love baseball. Marlins fan?
Actually, I'm not much of a baseball fan, to be honest with you. I'm more of a golf fan, which is why I love living in Florida, because I have gone to some PGA events. But if I had to choose between the Marlins and the Rays, I've never gone to a Marlins game, even though it's closer to my house. But I have gone a lot to the Rays games. And usually once a summer we go up to St. Pete's and we rent a hotel, stay on the beach, and go to a Rays game. I enjoy watching the way managers manage baseball teams. That's really interesting to me, how they manage the personnel. I was a huge Red Sox fan growing up in Eastern Canada. Growing up in the 70s, I knew every player on the Boston Red Sox. I hated the Blue Jays and I hated the Expos. Really? Because all the television stations we got in Nova Scotia were all broadcast out of Boston. So I became a huge Red Sox fan. Later on, I became an Expos fan towards the end of the run. And I was at their last game the year they were leading Major League Baseball, and the lockout happened. I was Marquise Grissom at an inside the park home run to win it in the 10th. And that was the last game of that year. I think the Expos would have won the World Series, and we'd still have baseball in Montreal.
That was such a good team, too.
They were unbelievable. I mean, you look at how Larry Walker's career was, and he was just starting out, on that team. But their pitching staff with Martinez, John Wetland is a closer. I mean, top to bottom, there wasn't anybody even close in the league, in either league that year. They definitely would have won the series. They would have had to have had a plane crash or a bus accident not to.
They even had Randy Johnson, I think, at that point too.
Yeah, they were. They were so good, and Felipe Alou was the manager. Top to bottom, they were just deep. I mean, they could play defense, and they had great offense, and they were fast on the bases. I mean, they had everything. Their bullpen was deep. They were an intimidating team, and Montreal, I think, is a baseball town, because I went to that last game in the Olympic Stadium, which is a terrible place to watch baseball. You couldn't get a seat that night. And I sat out in the right field bleachers with my wife now, who was my girlfriend at the time, and watched that game. It was awesome.
So did you become a Blue Jays fan now then?
No, not really. I hardly ever watch baseball. I really don't. I'm more like football, both college, NFL, CFL, Canadian Football League. I definitely watch the Grey Cup, top to bottom.
Next up we have Owen. He says, Coach, please help. I am what you will call an academic, not really good in sports. My son is 5 years old and would like to learn hockey among other sports, but I am a bit challenged. Any tips on how I can get some hockey skills to at least be ahead of him so I can help him to learn the game?
There's plenty of fathers that have good hockey playing sons that never played the game. So I think just educate yourself by watching it, but I don't think as a dad you have to be better than your son. You just want to support him. And I remember the first day that I was able to skate past my father on the ice. I remember the age I was, and I remember the moment that it happened. My son still can't skate as fast as me, and he's going to be 16 here at the end of January, but he's going to be able to pass me here pretty soon, I think. But that doesn't matter. There's plenty of parents of players that I've coached whose fathers never played the game. Just be there to support them. I think, as I said in previous weeks, hockey to me is the best team sport that there is, because it teaches all the core values that you want your children to learn in life: sacrifice, teamwork, self-evaluation, playing a role, playing a part within a group dynamic, and learning how to deal with different personalities. And obviously the athletic part of it too. Being able to skate upwards of 40 miles an hour on a quarter-inch piece of steel with a puck going 100 mile an hour on the ice takes a lot of finesse and a lot of skill to be able to do that.
I think it was Scott Brenham that told me that his dad didn't know anything about hockey.
No, his dad's a basketball guy.
Yeah. So you can make it all the way there.
Absolutely.
So for our last question, a person who specifically wanted to be identified as anonymous says, Merry Christmas, Coach. Have you been a good boy this season so that Santa will bring you plenty of good presents?
I sure hope so. I think I've been a good boy. I don't do anything other than work and sleep and lay on my couch, so that's about it. So I hope Santa's going to be good to me this year. But I'll see my wife and kids next Saturday, so I'm excited to see them.
Oh, that's excellent.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for joining us this week, Coach.
Anytime.
We want to thank Coach Cameron for joining us on Drop the Gloves this week. If you have your own questions you'd like to ask the Wichita Thunder coach, please send them to us at malcolmcameron@minorleaguesportsreport.com. That's malcolmcameron@minorleaguesportsreport.com. Please have your questions to us by Monday evening so we can give the coach a little time to review them before we record the show. I'm Rob Paneer, the managing editor of the Minor League Sports Report, and we'll